Welcome back to another Life in the Stands podcast. We have Jake, Zach, and Kyle on the show today. We're going to talk about some of the biggest storylines in the NBA playoffs so far, a rapid fire segment for both the NBA and the NFL, and then also a little bit of draft talk for the NFL, because since the NFL draft is taking place tomorrow, we're recording this on Wednesday, the day before the draft. So that would taking place tomorrow in Kansas City. And then we're going to also finish up with some thoughts on the new pitch clock in the MLB and how that's kind of affecting the game. So Kyle, do you want to kick us off and start us off by talking about some of the biggest storylines in the NBA playoffs so far? What do you think is the biggest storyline so far?
Right now, I mean, it has to be Timothy Butler. Himmy Butler. Last game was crazy. Honestly, that has been one of the greatest playoff performances in recent history. Like, honestly. And
Ever,
I believe they
ever.
play again tonight, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think we're going to see another classic Timothy Butler performance. I don't know if you guys have heard the rumor going around that Jimmy is Michael Jordan's lost son.
yeah, I
It's
saw
not,
that.
yeah, it's not real, but I mean, he's playing like it. He's playing insane.
I mean, how do
So,
you know that though?
yeah, true. You never know.
Yeah,
I honestly do think the Bucks win this game. I think it'll go to 7, but Jimmy Butler just has been really, really good for me, and I think he's got to be the biggest story in my eyes, anyway.
yeah, all of his percentages have actually gone up as well. And the big one is the 3-point percentage, especially
Yeah.
with the Miami Heat as a whole. Um, I believe I got this from JJ Redick on First Take the other day, talking about Duncan Robinson getting playing time, shooting 76% from three.
Duncan.
Jimmy's percentages up. Other guys are chipping in. Kyle Lowry playing stellar defense in the fourth quarter of that game. So you got to make sure you
Oh,
mention him in that. But
1 second.
um,
Don't
go ahead.
forget Kevin Love. They got him, Kevin Love.
They got him, Kevin Love.
Got him, Kevin Love. Yeah, the
Got him,
extra
Kevin
three
Love.
point shooting is doing them favors from Kevin Love, who I think has probably the worst 3 point shooting percentage of any Miami Heat player so far this
Come
series.
on, Kevin. No, tonight
Or
Kevin is dropping 30. That's my guarantee. 30
yeah,
from
let's.
Kevin tonight.
I'll bet you on that.
Okay, no,
But
I didn't put money
um,
on
A Kyle guarantee
um,
for Kevin to drop 30. I will take the under.
it.
yeah, for sure. I'll be under 10 on that one. But I will actually go a different route because y'all know I'm high on the Lakers' hopes. I think that the biggest story of this year's playoffs is about LeBron and the Lakers. I think this could be his final chance at a championship run. You finally see the supporting cast doing well. D'Lo didn't play well at the beginning of last game, but he had three straight threes to put him right back in. Rui's putting up 20 in a couple of the games this series. Austin Reeves still doing his thing. I feel like AD needs to be more consistent, but in the game the other night that they just won, Anthony Davis didn't have a big offensive game, but there's a stat saying that when he was the main defender, the field goal percentage was 3 of 18. So at least he's still making a defensive impact. But
Right.
I do believe it might be LeBron's last dance, or however you want to put that. So I think it's a big deal.
I will caution you in the last dance because it won't be his last dance until Bronny's there. And I think honestly, no matter where Bronny gets drafted, him following will probably turn that team into a contender. But that's a conversation we can have another time too. And I do agree with both those storylines. Obviously, I think the Heat being up 3-1 on the Bucks at all is a huge storyline. Regardless of who the best player on the Heat is right now. Obviously, it's Jimmy Butler. But that whole team honestly deserves a storyline. I think the Lakers, Bender, you kind of talked about it even before the playoffs. You kind of expected them to do this. So props for picking the Lakers. They've probably looked better against the Grizzlies than the Suns have looked against the Clippers. And I think we might all agree on that, even if the Suns did close out that series. Um, you know, the Clippers without having Paul George and Kawhi, Russell Westbrook still took them, to 5 rough games, and all those games were pretty close. They were hard fought. But if I had to pick a single storyline that's probably the biggest in the NBA playoffs so far, I think I'd have to pick the Atlanta Hawks taking the Celtics to 6 games so far. And now the fact that game 6 is in Atlanta, it could go to 7. It probably has a decent chance of going to 7 if that 6 game is in Atlanta. And no one gave the Hawks a shot. That's why I'm calling it the biggest storyline. Because if you looked at any of the first round series, you say, okay, like Miami hasn't shot that well this year, but they probably still shouldn't be an 8 seed. So that's going to be tough for the Bucks still. Sixers Nets, the Nets aren't the same team that got the 6 seed to begin with. So that I think everyone kind of expected to go as it did. Maybe not in 4 games, but to be wrapped up pretty quickly. Knicks Cavs, I think everyone expected that to be a great series. I don't think anyone looked at Celtics Hawks and was like, oh yeah, the Hawks are going to give the Celtics some trouble there. Like that was expected to be a sweep. And now we're looking at a game 6 in Atlanta that could be pushed to 7. So even if the Hawks don't come out of that series, what it does for Joel Embiid's rest and the Sixers coming out of their sweep, I think that's the biggest storyline so far. Because if that was flipped right now, Sixers are probably already done in the second round. But I think it's giving them a legit shot.
See, I think both of you are wrong because if you're talking about the biggest story, y'all are talking about one singular series. We're talking about a Heat team that I think will lose to the New York Knicks if they make it to the next round, if the Knicks continue to close out that series. And you're talking about the Hawks extending a series. You're not even talking about them winning a series. So I
So
think the biggest storyline is someone who's trying to be the GOAT and is in that conversation trying to put a stamp on that after breaking the scoring record.
so you think that the Heat, well, basically what you're saying is that the Bucks are worse than the Knicks. That's what you're saying to me right now.
No, I'm saying if the Heat win that series, the
They're
Heat
going
are
to lose to the
losing to the
Knicks,
Knicks.
but they're beating the Bucks right now, aren't they?
Yeah, but I think the Bucks are gonna probably push it to 7, which
Okay.
like you said, but I still think the biggest storyline then, if you want to talk about the Heat, I think the biggest storyline on that side of the conference is how the Bucks are struggling. They looked very like discombobulated at the end of that game. Obviously, Jimmy putting up 56 does not help. But I do think people expect it to be a breeze for them, and it just has not been that way.
Yeah. Injury. I mean, if you want to talk about like over the course of the whole playoffs too, you could also just say injuries are the biggest storyline so far. Because
True.
I mean, now at this point, you're looking at the next round, and there's already some things going on with next round with Embiid's injury and that kind of thing. Obviously, Giannis has missed some time. Hero's not going to come back unless it's in the NBA Finals. Kawhi and Paul George didn't play any of their like. So, and I mean,
Embiid,
and yeah, I mean, injuries might be
Giannis,
the biggest storyline straight up. Like if you're just talking about the entire playoffs, but um, yeah,
speaking
it's
of that,
interesting. It's been interesting.
I think De'Aaron Fox is supposed to try to play tonight. I don't know if he's going to be limited or
Saw
something.
that.
That would
Saw
be
that.
it's a
Yeah.
it's a playoff game. He won't be limited. It'll be either all or nothing, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He'll probably play through some pain, but that is what it is. Speaking of that too, because not that DeJounte Murray should be mentioned in the same category as De'Aaron Fox, but they just kind of remind me of each other. DeJounte Murray didn't play in game 5 in Boston, and the Hawks still won.
Hmm.
Yeah, but they also had he plays off the ball. I think
DeJounte?
Yeah, he
De'Aaron
does.
Fox being the primary guy, clutching up.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I understand like, DeJounte's not a primary ball handler, although he is sometimes when Trey's off the floor. He's still probably the second best player on the Hawks team. Maybe the
Definitely.
third, maybe the third, depending
Nah,
on who
second for
else you want to
sure.
throw in there. But second, yeah, like
Yeah, I think we agree on
I
second.
mean, yeah, so I mean, Hawks didn't have their second best player. They went into Boston and won game 5 in the closeout game.
Trey is him.
I mean, that's kind of like Ja missed some time, and they still won without him.
Yeah.
So
Although that's an even more interesting point because the Grizzlies have played better in that series without Ja there. That's the only game they won. So that's
I
another.
wouldn't sweat that too much. I wouldn't talk about that too much. I don't think that's that big of a deal. If you're talking, well, Kyle thought it was a big deal because I thought Clippers injuries are why that series went to shambles, and he was saying that's
The
no
Clippers
excuses because obviously I had the Clippers coming out of that series, so
Yeah,
that's not the case over
and
there. So
was
everything's situational.
hating on the Suns earlier. Mad
Anyway,
disrespect.
Ben, you're going to move us into the next topic here.
yeah, so we're gonna do some NBA rapid fire here. We've done this before. Zach's actually gonna ask me the questions here today, and he's gonna have the timer set up. It's a 1 minute timer. He's gonna ask me a bunch of questions, and I have to answer within that 1 minute.
Yep, awesome. And that was just enough of an explanation for me to set the 1 minute timer. So we're going to jump right into it here. All right, so Bender, I'm going to start this and I'm just going to ask the first question right away. All right, so is the Warriors dynasty over and would you blow it up this offseason?
After the last 2 games, I take my words back. I don't think it's over because I think the Fox injury impacts them, but I do think they blow up something this summer, and I think it'll be Draymond.
Would you rather have Jordan Poole or Austin Reeves on your team?
Jordan Poole.
Oh, I won't ask for an explanation there. I'll let TikTok do its thing on that one. Do you think Keegan Murray has been overlooked as one of the top rookies in this class? He's on the Sacramento team, starting on the Sacramento team, and I
I
haven't heard
think
his name a lot in Rookie of the Year or anything.
I think he
What a good
was
point.
because Paolo played on a crappy Orlando team that's just trying to tank for Victor. So I think you should start looking at those awards like you do MVP and award it to somebody that's on a winning team and impactful on a winning team.
Awesome. I have two questions left. First one, Ime Udoka was just hired by the Rockets. What do you think of that hiring?
They need to do some more rebuild before I have an actual opinion on that. I do think he's a good start, but I don't think the pieces they have there is really going to make them anything better.
Yeah, I saw something the other day that had the meme of I forget which two players it is. Maybe it's like Kareem and Magic Johnson, and it shows their stat lines, and they're like both just like quintuple doubles. And the meme said like Ime Udoka and James Harden in Houston strip clubs next year.
Yeah.
And I was like that. Like, all right, so I won't ask you about
That's
Harden going
good.
back to Houston. We can talk about that later too. But thought that was awesome. Okay, last question, and then we're over our minute time already. But last question: Is Zion turning into the next Ben Simmons?
Oh,
No, I believe not. I think Ben Simmons is a player that's dropping off the map and is not really getting his crap together, in my opinion. Zion has not as well. He has proven that he's able to lose weight. I just think injuries are putting him into shambles and kind of like ruining everything. I do not like his comments about um, saying like he doesn't feel like Zion though, because even if you could give that Pelicans team like let's say 15 to 20 minutes instead of playoff
Yeah,
36 to 40 minutes, it's
yeah,
still gonna make the defensive game plan of the other team look
yeah.
at you.
Yeah, and let me follow up on that question too. The reason I ask is because like CJ McCollum and some of the Pelicans players, like there's been some comments that have been made now about like Zion hasn't had a physical injury that's been keeping him out, right? Like it's
Well, he
been
strained
mental
it.
for the past little bit of the month,
He
like the
strained his
last little bit of the season.
hamstring. He strained his hamstring, but unless there was a actual setback, I feel like he's just sitting out due to the mental aspect of things, and it's way over the amount of time I thought he was going to sit out for. So
Right. Yeah. So that's why I asked the question. And when I ask, Zion turning into next Ben Simmons, that's really what I mean. Is like, are we going to see him have some legitimate mental struggles that keep him off the court over the next little bit? Because both generational players, both have huge upside, both can't stay in the court, both have had their like loyalty to the game, work ethic, whatever you want to call it, questioned. So I hope that's not the case, but
and
that's kind of the reason for the
and
question.
quick
And that's what I'll
comment.
follow up.
I would say quick comment. I think if he plays, I think they're a championship contender. They started off the season red hot and were top two in the West for the longest time until injuries occurred between him and Brandon Ingram. But obviously Brandon Ingram
Yep.
is playing. So
Yeah, definitely something to keep in mind.
Ben will be
Um,
back next year. MVP season incoming.
Ben, we're going to move on from the NBA because I don't think I can take any more Ben Simmons talk with Kyle on this call.
Oh
Um,
man.
we're going to transition into some NFL draft stuff. So QBs have obviously been like a huge part of the NFL draft this year. There's a lot of top flight QBs. We're going to talk specifically about Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. Where do we think those guys will end up? Bender, we can go back to you for this one first. Do you think all three of them land in the top five? Like, what do you think happens?
I do not think all of them land top five. I think Bryce Young's the obvious number one pick. I personally don't like him, but just based off of what I've been hearing, it sounds like that's their guy over CJ
Mhm.
Stroud. Um, Due to the fact that the Texans coach is defensive minded, I think they're going to pass on a quarterback at their number two pick, and I think they'll get an edge rusher. I don't know who, but I do think they'll go defensive with that pick. And with that being said, CJ Stroud avoids Houston because everybody wants to avoid Houston nowadays. I
Yeah.
think he'll fall to the Colts at number four. I think the Colts have been tired of messing up on their picks, and I feel like CJ Stroud, in my opinion, is the safest pick in this draft. Anthony Richardson, obviously, that's the other guy we're talking about here. I think he goes to the Lions at number 18 to back up Jared Goff. I think he'll kind of be in the back burner, and then let's say Jared Goff gets hurt or has a bad game. Well, he played well last year, so I can't say he'll necessarily have a bad game, but you know how those situations work with a rookie quarterback with expectations behind him. So I think there's a chance he goes there. Um, And another person I want to mention is Hendon Hooker. I think he'll go before Anthony Richardson in the draft. It
Wow.
sounds like the Commanders are high on him, so I think he'll go before Anthony Richardson at that Detroit pick.
Do you think the Commanders are already ready to move off of Sam Howell?
Yes,
I
they're ready to
They
move
didn't
on
give him
from
a
everything
chance.
that's there.
mean, hey, the Titans are already ready to move on from Malik Willis, so
I
makes
mean, he
sense.
is
That
garbage.
I mean, that Kenny Pickett pick last year all of a sudden doesn't look too bad when the other QBs out of the freaking draft last year all tanked. When Kenny Pickett got taken 20th overall last year, everyone was like, "Oh, like why wasn't Malik Willis the first
Real
quarterback
quick.
taken?"
I'm getting on Kyle for this one. You
Malik
called
Willis
Malik
is
Willis.
he is so bad. Oh my God.
We
He's
saw
not.
we saw very little games of him though. You can't just
Dude,
say that after
I
one
had
year.
Derrick Henry in fantasy. I'm sitting there just watching this guy throw like you remember that Kansas City game when they were up 20 something and then they went away from the run because and they were like, "Oh, let's try to let Willis throw the ball once." And he's just chucking dimes to the audience, man. He was
Yeah,
trash.
I don't think Malik Willis is a great NFL quarterback. I don't think that he ever will be a great NFL quarterback. Um, the difference between him and Anthony Richardson is that Anthony Richardson played at Florida and actually saw some success. Malik Willis played at Liberty and didn't see that much success.
I got you there. It's all raw talent though too between the two of them. So I think Anthony Richardson's ceiling's higher, but I feel like we're not giving Malik Willis a chance either.
Yeah, I think ceiling's higher, but I also would say the floor is higher for Anthony
Yes. Yeah.
Richardson. So yeah, that's where we're going at. But
Yeah.
in going back to the conversation at hand though, I do agree that I think Bryce Young will probably end up being the first overall pick. I don't like that. I don't think that's a great move with how much other talent is in the draft this year. There's so much edge talent. There's so much corner talent. So much defensive talent. So much offensive tackle talent. Like a ton of offensive linemen, I think, have first round grades on them. So don't love the Bryce Young pick, but I do think he'll go first. Did you guys see CJ Stroud's SP? I think it's called like SP
I
test or whatever,
I
or
was gonna
PQ
bring that
test
up.
or
S2
um
cognition test,
yeah.
cognitive test that focus on processing and decision making. He was in the 18th percentile. That is so
Yeah.
trash.
He scored very poorly on the cognition test. And from what I understand, it's like a reaction test. So it's not like an intelligence test like the Wonderlic or anything, or like how that was. It's purely just like what's your reaction time like, and like how quickly can you process information and then react to that. And yeah, I mean Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis all scored great. CJ Stroud did not. CJ Stroud
I think I could
scored
score
the
higher than
opposite of
him.
great. Yeah, like honestly, like it's a very low percentile, and like that test did accurately predict Brock Purdy because Brock Purdy scored in like the 90 plus percentile in that test, stepped into the NFL and was a great NFL QB last year as a rookie.
Oh
Um,
no.
so
I would
I
like to
don't
go
know,
to
like
Bender here for a second. Sorry, you brought up I know he has some thoughts about Brock Purdy.
No, I don't have thoughts about Brock Purdy. I kind of like Brock Purdy. I think he should be
Oh,
their number one option in San
oh,
Fran
okay.
without
I
question.
agree.
Um,
I
I
agree
do
too. Yeah.
think I do think they should move on from Trey Lance, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Um, but I wanted to make comments about CJ Stroud's results on that. I don't think that's a big deal because there are guys like he did have success in college with Ohio State, so I'm not too worried. I think there are guys that are based off of instinct and in-game play. I feel like these other tests or things they want to do with people in the combine really don't mean much. And I honestly think like if you just look at the tape, you'd be okay. You don't need to look at what DK Metcalf did to know that he's good. Like you can see he's built like a brick shit house and can run whatever, but
Yeah.
like I wouldn't sweat that too much.
So one rebuttal I would have to that is if you watch CJ Stroud's tape, the receivers that he is throwing to are probably all top 20 picks over the next year. Like in this draft, and
Marvin
then
Harrison Jr. especially.
Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba. He threw to Garrett Wilson last year. Garrett Wilson
I'd
stepped into
agree
the
with that.
NFL and had 1,000 receivers. So if you look at his tape too, like on the flip side of that, he's playing with generational receivers.
Mhm.
So I don't, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one. Sleeper pick for me, I think the Steelers are actually going to trade up into the top 10. I think if Jalen Carter falls to the ninth pick and doesn't get drafted before the ninth pick, right now the Bears have the ninth pick. They traded back from 1 to number 9. I think the Steelers trade their 17th and their 32nd that they originally got from the Bears to move up to 9, and I think they take Jalen Carter.
Hmm.
So that would be my sleeper. I think if there's any organization that could take Jalen Carter and not be worried about any off the field issues, it's someone like the Steelers or the Patriots or something like that. And out of anyone that could use a Jalen Carter, the Steelers, like Cam Hayward's getting old. He's getting really old. We lost Tyson Alualu. We lost Stephon Tuitt. We could use another impactful interior defensive lineman that can play all over the place and fit that kind of weird zone scheme the Steelers run. If he falls past, like out of that top 5 and he gets into the 7th, 8th, 9th pick, I think the Steelers trade both that 17th and 32nd. They move up and they get Jalen Carter. So that'd be my sleeper.
I like that idea, Kyle. Let's go to you. Where do you think people are ending up?
Outside of like what CJ Stroud and like where Will Levis is going and stuff. Do you mean like
Yeah. So do you have a just random sleeper? Anything surprising do you think's gonna happen?
well, I think there's going to be a big shakeup when it comes to the Cardinals because I heard earlier that the Cardinals are looking to shop D-Hop, and I heard that the Ravens were interested. And as a Ravens fan, I would love to see D-Hop and Odell in the same, wide receiver room. I think that'd be amazing. So I think I don't know what the deal is going to look like, to be honest. But I feel like if Lamar's requirements to come back and play are going to be like, yo, I need receivers because that's what he said for years. I mean, we got him Deshaun Jackson, like
Those were the 2 guys he wanted to, by the way.
yeah,
OBJ
it's
is
gonna-
already signed, and then they're going for D-Hop. So
It's going to
Yeah,
be
so-
really funny when they sign OBJ and D Hop, and then Tyler Huntley is going to be the quarterback going to them next year.
yeah, if
no,
Lamar
come
just
on,
says,
man.
"See ya."
No. He wants to come play, guys. Trust me.
But Jalen Hurts took less money than the Deshaun Watson deal. So I think Jalen Hurts is the standard there, and he made a Super Bowl
Yeah.
appearance. So I
Yeah.
think Lamar wants around that money now, which would make sense, or
Right.
even maybe a little bit less, maybe like 160 instead of 170. I think that makes sense for the Ravens to try and work something out that way. It basically gave Ravens management leverage after that Jalen Hurts deal was done.
Yeah,
That was
because he was
it
going,
definitely did.
everyone was going off of the Deshaun Watson deal, which obviously got restructured because they realized how poor it was. So I guess we'll see if Lamar stays, but I think he'll stay if they trade for D-Hop.
That'd be an insane wide receiver room because then you still have Mark Andrews, you have Rashad Bateman, who's young, really, really good.
Yeah.
So honestly, I think
Duvernay.
Rashad, yeah, right, Duve, even though he's mainly like punt return, but they like to use him in like sweep action stuff like that. So we'll see.
I think having depth keeps guys like D-Hop and OBJ healthy for a full season too, going into playoffs.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's similar to what the Steelers even did too. Like they didn't bring in Allen Robinson because they think Allen Robinson is going to have 1,000-yard season. They brought in Allen Robinson because they don't want to have Deontay and George Pickens be the only options. And they want like just enough depth to kind of loosen some of that up. So yeah, I think the Ravens doing that would be really, really smart. As a Steelers fan though, I would love to see Lamar Jackson back in a Ravens uniform.
Whoa.
He
Really?
performs worse against the Steelers than any other NFL team, and it's not even close. I watched Robert Spillane pick 6 Lamar Jackson on the first play from scrimmage last year in one of the Steelers-Ravens games. Robert Spillane. I don't think I've seen him get within 10 yards of the ball in
I'm gonna be
pass
honest.
coverage since then.
I don't even know who that is.
That's what I'm saying. Like who is Robert Spillane? That is the point I'm making.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so like Lamar historically when he plays the Steelers, I think he's only played like 5 career games against the Steelers, and he has like 14 turnovers, and the Ravens are like 1-4 in those games. So for me, I'm like, this sounds great. Like bring him back, man. Of course.
Topic for a different day, but I think OBJ and D-Hop unlocks Lamar a little bit more than what he's already been, because I think his health will also improve. Because they leaned heavily on him, so I think his health will improve based off of that, and they won't run him as much because it's not needed as much.
I declined to comment to that addition to the conversation.
All right, we'll talk about that.
I saw a stat that Lamar is actually a better pocket passer than Ben Roethlisberger was in his career. So that's all I'm going to say. And just leave it there.
That's
2
an
Super
interesting
Bowls,
one.
Super Bowl MVP,
Whatever.
top 5 yards, top 5 completions,
All
top 5
right,
touchdowns.
all right. Break it up, you two. All right. Next thing we're going to go into here to close out our NFL section, we're going to do NFL rapid fire, and we're actually going to have Kyle ask Zach the questions this time around. Zach still has his 1 minute timer going on over there. So whenever y'all are ready, you can go ahead and Kyle can ask him questions.
All right. We kind of already talked about this, but who do the Panthers take with the first pick?
Yeah, I think they take Bryce Young. If they don't take Bryce Young and it is someone other than him, I think it's Anthony Richardson, just because the upside potential is so great that if they don't take the simple guy, I think they go balls to the wall and just
Full
take
send.
the huge prospect. Yeah, full send.
I like it. Who wins the AFC North next year?
That's a good question considering the conversation we just had.
Right.
If you look at all the offseason additions, and obviously this is before the draft, so that's kind of difficult as well because the draft will make a big difference here as well. I think the Bengals probably still win the division, if I'm being like totally honest. Joe Burrow is probably still the best quarterback in the division, and if T. Higgins isn't going anywhere, Jamar Chase might be the best receiver in the division still. And then they did some things to shore up their offensive line, brought in Orlando Brown, and some other things there. I like the Bengals probably still.
You brought up Burrow, so this is actually my next question. Who do you think will have a better season next year, Burrow or Josh Allen?
Burrow, not as big of a Josh Allen fan as other people are. I think he's still very turnover prone. Yeah.
Where do you think Zeke and Leonard Fournette land?
Oh, I don't know. And then timer just went out, so that'll be the last question, unless you have a really good one to end on. Um, oh, this is a good question too. So where will Zeke end up, and where will Leonard Fournette end up?
I want to ask you one more then after this.
Yeah, Leonard Fournette wants to go to a championship contender. Um,
That's tough. I don't think
I
Zeke goes to. I don't think Zeke goes to the Jets.
I don't think Zeke goes to the Jets either. I could see Zeke trying to win a chip too. I could see Zeke going to like Kansas City to split
Mm,
reps with Pacheco and
yeah.
back up Pacheco. You got a young guy there that's super hungry, but you bring in Zeke to mentor him and then take a little bit of the load off. So I could see like Zeke making a move like that, maybe like a Kansas City or something like that. I could see Fournette maybe going like somewhere like the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys are probably in the market for a bruiser kind of a running back. Pollard's just not that. And I think if they try to go into next season, assuming Pollard is going to be a 3 down running back and do everything at all times, I think you're probably going to run Pollard into the dirt on top of him coming back from an injury. So I could see like Fournette, like maybe filling that role a little bit for them, especially as Pollard kind of works his way back in.
Quick thought on that. I don't think we pick up a veteran running back. I think there's a chance. I'm sorry if I butcher the name, but I think we get Bijan Robinson in the
I
draft.
was gonna say that too. Yep.
You think
I
the
thought
Cowboys will take Bijan? I've been seeing a
Mhm.
lot of stuff tying the Eagles to Bijan Robinson too, which is interesting.
Both, but I think
Yeah,
the Eagles might get Derrick Henry. So we'll see.
crazy. It is a crazy NFL year. I feel like just much more activity going on, which is cool. But Kyle, you said you have one more question for the rapid
Yeah.
fire.
Speaking of activity, will Jimmy G save the Raiders? What is that
I
face? You know, like
I
Jimmy
I
G?
I feel like I want my whole response to just be a sigh. Like, can that just be like my
They
answer to
got
that question? It's
Devontae,
just
man.
sigh. Yeah, and Josh Jacobs is great,
Right.
and hopefully Darren Waller can stay in the field, and
Darren
Max
Waller's
Darren Waller's
already
with the
Crosby.
he's with the
Darren Waller's
Giants.
with the
Oh,
Giants,
sorry, yeah, the Giants. Yeah, yeah. So
so
never
that
mind
makes it
then
even
either.
worse.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, is Josh McDaniel still the coach?
Yeah,
I think
I
so.
think save is a strong word in that question.
Yeah, save them from Josh McDaniels.
I was gonna say I
Maybe.
think it's gonna be more of a can Josh McDaniels save his career? I think that's the better question.
Fair.
Yeah, and
Fair.
for me, the answer would be no. Like Jimmy G's a winner, so like I think they'll probably end up with a winning record. They might sneak into a playoff seed because there's no way they're going to win the division with Kansas City there. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
So like maybe they sneak in like 10-7, but if that's the case, they're playing like they're probably either playing like the Bengals, Bills, Chiefs, like some Jets in the first round then. So yeah, like
Yeah,
I don't think the Raiders do anything this year.
I do want to make one more comment because you mentioned when Kyle asked you about the number one pick with the Panthers, and then you mentioned Anthony Richardson if they don't get him.
Hmm.
Obviously, we're talking off the walls, but I'm like the king of making Anthony Richardson comparisons. So I compared him to Lamar, and I think that like the Ravens could trade Lamar to get Anthony Richardson in the draft. I
Yeah,
don't think that anymore after the signings that happened with OBJ. Now they're probably going to get D-Hop, that kind of thing. But
right.
I think the Anthony Richardson to the Panthers is probably the next closest thing to what Cam Newton was.
Oh boy.
That is a good point. Obviously, you got different ownership and everything there now. Or I think it's a different owner, maybe a different, maybe not a different owner, but a different GM and
Somewhere
coach,
upstairs, yeah.
obviously. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind that comparison either. That's where they saw most of their success, right? Was with Cam Newton. So
Yeah, wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, so moving on from the NFL, we're gonna end here with some MLB talk here, and we closed out our last show talking about this, and I want to spend more time on it. So Kyle, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the new pitch clock in the MLB?
I really like the idea. I like the concept. I think there's still like are some issues with it. Specifically, we were talking about the podcast, like after the podcast last time, about how most MLB stadiums will stop serving alcohol after like the seventh inning. So obviously, the pitch clock speeds up the game, and then like stadiums are still selling that, so people aren't really getting sober before heading home. People, I'm sure there's been more accidents caused because of that, but overall, I do think it is a good thing for the game. I think it makes it more interesting. I think more people who aren't necessarily into baseball will watch because of it. Um, I do think that there's obviously some issues with it. Like I said, also pitchers just adjusting to it will take some time.
Yeah, so Zach actually mentioned last time, obviously he's not the biggest like baseball fan in the world. He said it makes it more interesting, in his opinion, due to the speed up of the game. Zach, do you want to elaborate more on that?
yeah, I mean, I think you said it in like really basic terms, right? Like for me, like the sports that I grew up watching and playing a ton were like football, basketball, and lacrosse. So I mean, those sports to me, like there's like always something going on. And even like I guess you could compare like the closest that you compare that's probably football to baseball because like basketball is a constant movement sport, lacrosse is a constant movement kind of thing, kind of like soccer. But football, you at least have like plays, and then you have like periods where like nothing is happening. But even for that, like I understand the game of football way more, so I could understand why there's the breaks and how that could influence the game and all those kinds of things. Baseball is just slow and boring to me. Like I really didn't understand like why there was so much time in between these pitches and stuff. And I know like there are calls that catchers and pitchers make, and I know that like there are some things that go on there, but like I just couldn't ever sit down and watch a game. Like I just couldn't be entrenched enough to do that. But with a pitch clock, like I feel like I could sit down and watch a baseball game. Like that's something that could be like an enjoyable experience now. And the pace of play would be quick enough that like it would actually keep my attention and stuff. Kyle mentioning like about the alcohol sales and stuff. I think that is something that really needs to be considered, especially if the innings are shorter. Not only are you waiting until an inning later to stop selling alcohol, but also that eighth and ninth inning are shorter than what they used to be. So you used to have two full innings of time in between. Now you have one full inning, and that inning might be only half as much time. So that, I do think that's a legitimate issue that probably needs to be figured out. I would maybe even move it the opposite way. Like maybe after like the sixth inning, you need to stop serving alcohol because that would be like the similar amount of time. But in general, yeah, I mean, I think it just makes it much more watchable. You're probably going to open your fan base up a little bit more. I think it's good for the game. You're coming from an outside fan perspective. But Bender, you're
Yeah.
probably in the middle of us. You're probably in the middle of Kyle and I. Probably Kyle probably watches the most baseball. You're probably in the middle where you watch some. I know you're a Phillies fan. What do you think
So
of the pitch clock?
So I'm actually kind of on the same page as both you guys, but I did want to mention the teams that have extended their alcohol sales to the eighth inning. Um, were the Arizona Diamondbacks, Texas Rangers, Minnesota Twins, and Milwaukee Brewers. And there are other teams, I believe the Mets are one of them, thinking about extending as well. I think there will be some kind of data coming out where it's like crashes after the games, like within a certain mileage of the arena or stadium.
Yeah.
So I think that will eventually come out. But I have a specific question for Kyle. Real quick answer here since we don't have a lot
Yeah.
of time. But do you think the pitch clock is impacting pitchers' performances? Because I know with Aaron Nolan, Zach Wheeler, for the Phillies specifically, they like to take their time in between. Do you think that's impacting pitchers?
Absolutely. I think when you've been pitching one way your entire career, like obviously like 20 years of experience just goes down the drain there and you have to speed it up. So I think people will get used to it as time goes on, but as of right now, I think it is definitely like impacting people negatively.
And there's a flip side to that, right? Because it also affects the batters. The batters need to
Right.
be on the ball a bit more too. But it seems to me, from an outside perspective, again, that the pitchers are the ones that are much more affected. The batters don't seem to mind as much, from what I pick up.
Yeah, and I think it's also having to do with trying to think through your next pitch based off of scouting and where the catcher wants to place the ball, what kind of pitch. Like those different calls have to be sped up as well. So it might be more of like a snap decision than a
Sure.
take your
Well,
time a little bit.
they kind of
Uh,
have that planned out before even the batter steps in. Like before the game, they know every pitch that they're going to throw to a
yeah,
batter.
but let's say you're in a battle and it's like 10 pitches into one batter because he keeps fouling the ball off. You're
Yeah.
going to change up what you're doing.
It's true.
So I
Yeah.
think it kind of impacts. I think it impacts game plan. I think it impacts like the pitcher's conditioning as well. They need to be in tip top shape for that.
Right.
So thank you guys. Stay ready for more NBA content as the second round will be starting in no time, and be ready to listen to what teams had the best drafts tomorrow, as we talked about this upcoming episode, and we'll see if that impacts playoffs or how the rosters will shape up. See y'all next time.